Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. To the elites, thank you so much for your dedication and love. It comes right back to you in abundance. To the newbies who have never seen me before on screen, hi. I'm not a AI. I'm a real guy. So anyway, as we continue to go along and you like the video, please leave a like and leave a comment down below and let me know if you liked it, loved it, hated it. And if you'd like to become part of the channel, please leave a subscribe and set your notification bell to all. That way you know every time I upload a video. Now, today we will have a special guest. He goes by the name TEEJLEA from the YouTube channel Dusk Light Radio. I will have all of his credentials down in the description box below. Please go over there and show him some love. His work is fantastic. And tell him Phoenix says hello. All right, let's grab your blankets, your fur babies, your significant others, your snacks, or whatever it takes to get you comfortable. And let's dive into this Vocal Melatonin entitled True Horrific Valentine's Day Stories. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. Right after I read the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video.
It's funny how Valentine's Day can twist a knife into your heart when you're alone. Every February 14th, the same ritual. Couples intertwined under streetlights, their laughter like needles in my chest, while I scroll through endless feeds of roses and proposals, feeling like the discarded wrapper from yesterday's chocolate. Invisible, unwanted, the last forgotten thing on the shelf. This year, though, desperation pushed me further than ever. I heard whispers about a singles gathering at the old community center downtown. Nothing fancy, just a room full of lonely people pretending they weren't. Cheesy, sure, but after years of silence in my apartment, what did I have to lose? I stood before the mirror longer than I cared to admit. My reflection stared back with hollow eyes. The cologne I'd chosen suddenly smelling too sharp, like something trying to mask decay. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes, and left anyway. The center was drowning in red and pink. Balloons bobbed lazily against the ceiling like dying breaths. Cheesy love songs droned from hidden speakers, their lyrics curling around me like smoke. Everyone seemed to be performing, laughing too loudly, touching arms too deliberately. I nursed a flat soda against the wall, watching, waiting for something to feel real. Conversations fizzled before they began. One woman recited her ex's sins like a litany. Another barely looked up from her phone, her thumbs moving faster than her words. No connection, just echoes in an empty room. I was ready to slip out unnoticed when I saw her. She stood alone in the shadowed corner, drink untouched, dark hair falling like spilled ink over her shoulders. Something about her pulled at me, maybe the way she mirrored my own discomfort, or the faint, almost imperceptible smile that seemed to know secrets I didn't. My pulse quickened in a way it hadn't in years. I crossed the floor before doubt could stop me. "Hi," I said, voice cracking like thin ice. "I'm terrible at this, but I had to say something." She lifted her gaze slowly. Her eyes were deep, too deep, swallowing the dim light. "I'm glad you did," she murmured. "I'm terrible at this too." The room dissolved around us. We talked for hours. Movies that scared us as kids, books that felt like confessions, the worst Februaries we'd survived. Her laugh started soft, then grew, filling the space between us like something alive. It wrapped around me, warm at first, then tighter, too tight. But I ignored it. For once, someone was listening, really listening. Time bled away. Balloons sagged, lights dimmed. When the last stragglers left, I asked for her number with shaking hands. She wrote it on a scrap of paper. her fingers brushing mine, cold, impossibly cold, and smiled in a way that made the hairs on my neck rise. We promised to meet again. I walked to my car floating, replaying her voice, convincing myself this was the turning point. I didn't notice how the streetlights flickered as I passed, or how the shadows seemed to lean towards me. The texts came quickly, playful at first, then insistent. We planned dinner at a quiet Italian place I liked. All day I felt watched, by mirrors, by windows, by the empty corners of my apartment. Nerves, I told myself. She was waiting when I arrived, radiant in the low candlelight, more beautiful than memory allowed. Conversation flowed like wine, effortless, intimate. She asked questions that cut straight to the bone, things I'd never voiced aloud. I told her secrets I'd buried deep. Her gaze never wavered. It drank me in. We lost hours. When the waiter hinted at closing, she suggested her place for one last drink. I followed without hesitation. Her apartment smelled faintly of old roses and something metallic underneath. We sat close on the couch. The wine was dark, heavy. Her laughter shifted, sharper, less human. Stories twisted mid-sentence into fragments that didn't fit. Her touch lingered too long, fingers pressing like they were searching for something beneath my skin. Then her eyes changed. The warmth drained away, replaced by something ancient and empty. Her pupils dilated until black swallowed the iris. Her voice dropped octaves, layered, as though multiple mouths spoke at once. "You've been so lonely," she whispered, but it wasn't her voice. It echoed from inside her, from somewhere deeper. So open, so ready. I laughed nervously. She didn't. I excused myself to the bathroom, heart hammering. The mirror showed my face pale, eyes wide. When I returned, she stood too still, head tilted at an unnatural angle. Words spilled from her in a language I didn't recognize. Low, guttural, hungry. The door wouldn't budge when I tried to leave. The handle burned cold under my palm. Something pressed against the wood from the other side. Unseen, patient. She moved closer, jerky like a marionette with half-cut strings. Her face rippled, skin stretching, then sagging, then stretching again. Not her face anymore. Something wearing her. Something that had waited a long time. I lunged for the window. Glass exploded outward in a rain of shards. I didn't feel the cuts. I fell, rolled, ran, barefoot, bleeding into the night. Behind me, her, not her, screamed in layered voices that tore at the air, a sound like grief and triumph twisted together. I glanced back once. She stood framed in the shattered window, unmoving. Her eyes were voids, not empty, inviting, like they wanted company down there in the dark. I drove until dawn, knuckles white, tasting blood. Sleep brought no relief. Dreams of her standing outside my window, tapping softly, patient, waiting. The disturbances started small. Objects shifted when I wasn't looking. My reflection blinked when I didn't. The TV hissed static at 3:17 a.m., forming shapes that almost looked like her smile. Then the tapping came, soft at first, then insistent. I pulled the curtain aside. She was in the yard below, staring up, black eyes gleaming under the streetlight. The same twisted smile. How had she found me? What did she want? I barricaded myself in, slept with the lights on. Every creak was her. Every silence is worse. Desperate, I found a medium. She listened without judgment, then said the words that chilled me deepest. It wasn't drawn to your loneliness. It was drawn to what lives inside it. what you've carried alone for so long, it recognized itself in you. The cleansing smelled of sage and fear. She chanted. Something shrieked inside me, brief, furious, then silence. The tapping stopped. The shadows retreated, but I still feel it sometimes. A faint pressure behind my eyes, a whisper in quiet moments asking if I'm still lonely. Because loneliness is a door left ajar, and some things wait patiently for an invitation. I don't go to singles events anymore. I don't answer unknown numbers. I don't look too long in mirrors after dark. Valentine's Day still comes. The couples still walk hand in hand. But now I know. Some connections aren't meant to fill the emptiness. They're meant to crawl inside and stay.
I live by myself in my mid-40s on a quiet remote island nestled in the heart of Puget Sound. Tall firs and cedars blanket the landscape, the island encircled by water. My home perches high on a bluff, gazing down at a small inlet. A quick walk through the woods brings to a sandy shore where I keep my kayaks on a simple rack. Just lift them down, slide over the low seawall, and I'm paddling out. After my long-term relationship ended, turns out his work trips involved other women, I found myself alone again. Friends gently nudged me. Get back out there, have some fun. It'll boost your confidence. They meant well. I knew they were worried I was turning into that sad single woman staring down the barrel of another birthday milestone. Dating might make me feel wanted again. But in such an isolated spot, how do you even begin? A colleague reminded me that hardly anyone meets in person these days. It's all apps now. Tinder, Bumble, Plenty of Fish, OkCupid. So I created profiles and soon my inbox was flooded. A few casual hookups followed. The excitement helped pull me out of my funk. But I kept measuring every new guy against my ex. Some things were better. He actually listens when I talk about my day. Other things stung. He doesn't open doors the way my ex did, or his hand doesn't quite nestle into mine the same. Those constant comparisons told me I wasn't over it. I was still grieving the old relationship. Jumping into something new was too soon. I stepped back and turned inward, which I should have done immediately. I explored every trail on the island, paddled for hours, taught my clever mini Australian shepherd to press those word buttons to talk. I threw myself into work, adopted a tiny kitten someone had cruelly tossed from a car right in front of me. She and the dog are inseparable now. Bought a vivid pink suitcase and traveled wherever I could. Picked up recurve archery, everything I'd postponed for years. Nearly 2 years slipped by. Thoughts of my ex faded to indifference. That's when I felt truly ready to try again. Back on the apps, I messaged a ride from an attractive, sharp lawyer in a city about 90 minutes away. We chatted for weeks. No warning signs surfaced. I started to feel optimistic. Then he suggested coming to my place. Immediate red flag. I wasn't inviting a near stranger to my secluded home, especially when it felt like he might expect more than conversation. I politely declined, explaining I didn't know him well enough yet. He said he understood and pivoted to inviting me to dinner instead, letting me choose the spot. I hesitated. The first flag lingered. Did he really just want dinner, or was he pushing boundaries? But he hadn't been pushy about it, so maybe I'd misread it. I proposed drinks first at the bar of a favorite Japanese steakhouse hibachi place, roughly halfway for both of us. If it felt right, we'd stay for dinner. He agreed enthusiastically. We texted all week. The chemistry built. Shared interests. Easy banter. The earlier concern faded. Date night. I chose a ruffled black top, fitted jeans, boots, light makeup, curled hair, nerves buzzing. I drove the hour there early, ordered an amaretto sour, and took a seat with a view of the entrance. I'm not much of a drinker, social only, and never when driving, so I nursed it slowly. He arrived precisely on time, looking even better than his photos. Tall, dark, handsome. He greeted the hostess, got directed to me, approached with a warm smile. "You're even more beautiful in person," he said, then noticed my drink. A small frown. "You started without me?" My laugh lightly. "Better catch up." He grinned, called the bartender over, and we talked effortlessly. Smart, charming. I decided I'd overreacted to the home invite thing. Dinner sounded perfect. The hostess seated us at a hibachi grill, communal style. Strangers sharing the table. Only 2 spots remained, corner positions. Me on one short side, him on the long side. Our knees almost brushing. Nice for talking, but strangers flanked us too. He tried ordering me another drink right away. I declined. Still had to drive. That frown returned. "Come on, one more. We're going to be here for a while." He told the waiter anyway. "Another amaretto sour?" I froze. The table went quiet. Big red flag. He glanced at his phone, typed something, flipped it over, smiled like nothing happened. Conversation resumed, but stilted now. He kept checking his phone, angling it away. Another red flag. The guy next to him glimpsed the screen once, looked horrified, whispered to his companion. She looked appalled, too. Our chef arrived, performed the show, spinning spatula, onion volcano, perfect food. My date pocketed the phone during that, enchanted as a first-timer. But afterward, back to texting. The neighbor kept glancing, whispering. His partner stared at me like she wanted to speak, but couldn't. I knew this was our only date. As Mills wrapped, he set his napkin down. "Bathroom break. When I return, you're finishing that drink." He left. The couple next to him immediately turned, eyes huge. She whispered shakily to her partner, "You tell her." He sighed and leaned in. "We think he put something in your drink when you looked away at the wall art. He was messing with it. Don't touch it. And he's texting another man. Messages about tying you up, taking turns, using you up before getting rid of you. You need to leave now." She gasped. "He's coming back." I glanced. He was striding over. I stood, grabbed my purse. "I know, I promise I'll finish it, but bathroom first. Be right back." Voice shaky, but he didn't catch it. The restroom sat right by the exit and entrance. I walked that way, then straight past, out the doors into cold night air. Hands trembling. I unlocked my car, jumped in, locked up, started driving. No pursuit. Breathing hard, I checked mirrors obsessively. Nothing. 20 minutes later, texts. You okay? Worried. Then, did you fall in? Then angrier. Hostess checked. You left. What the fuck? More poured in. Vicious. I cursed, not blocking him sooner, but kept driving, desperate for home. At my gated driveway, I hit the remote, grateful for the paranoia that made me install it after the breakup. Inside, I bolted doors, deadbolt too. Upstairs, phone showed dozens more hateful messages. I screenshotted everything, blocked him, deleted my profiles across apps. I considered police, but had no hard proof. No drink tested, no neighbor contacts. Hadn't seen texts myself. Still, I reported to non-emergency in the city where we'd met. Figured it might help if others had stories. Fear lingered. Nights felt heavier. The great blue herons nesting in the tall pines on the bluff. Once enchanting with their ancient croaking calls like something from a prehistoric world. Now startled me, sounding like warnings in the dark. Logic said he had no way to find me. Anxiety whispered what ifs, online traces, searching, lurking. 6 months on, volunteering in the school garden in town. A nice-looking guy in a button-up and jeans, glasses, civil engineer walking nearby on a salmon ladder, approached awkwardly, stumbled through garden questions. Then, "You're really pretty. Stunning. Can I have your number?" I smiled, gave it. Fast forward another 6 months. We're together on the couch, news playing. His mugshot appears, along with another's, arrested for drugging, raping multiple women, 2 murders. Investigators later interviewed me, my statement recorded. The pair got sloppy last time, invited himself over. Accomplice waited outside. Neighbor noted plate. Turns out, he wasn't even a lawyer. They pled guilty. No trial for me. That spring, the herons deep, roaring calls returned to wonder instead of terror. Knowing those men were locked away. It unfolded near Valentine's. Poetic justice, in a way. They got punishment. I got safety. And someone real. The biggest takeaway? Trust your instincts. Red flags aren't suggestions. Excusing them can cost everything. Listen to that inner voice. It might just save your life. Last Valentine's Day stands out as one of the absolute worst times for a breakup. Right up there with those dramatic runaway bride tales you sometimes spot online. I never imagined my then boyfriend, Caleb, would actually end things with me, especially after we'd weathered some tough moments together. It felt like we'd pushed through the worst of it. The signs weren't there at all. Just the week prior, he'd gone out of his way to secure a table at Red Lobster, requested time off from his job, and kept saying he was planning something special to make me feel truly appreciated. Everything pointed to a romantic celebration. Then, first thing, Valentine's morning, my phone buzzed with a text that shattered everything. He'd decided to call it quits. Who does something like that on February 14th? It felt straight out of some immature teenage drama. I immediately dialed him, demanding answers. He claimed it had all become overwhelming for him. "Molly, I'm sorry. I should have said something earlier." He rattled off a list of excuses that rang hollow. I knew Caleb well enough to recognize when he was dodging the real issue. His rambling was a dead giveaway. The more he spoke, the more furious I grew. Through sobs, I begged him to at least admit if there was someone else. "Please, don't tell me if you cheated. If you did, I don't know what I'll do to myself." He swore there was no cheating and said I could keep any gifts he'd arranged, including the dinner reservation. "This is sudden, I know, but I need time to figure out my life and where I'm headed." He mentioned staying in touch, but the flatness in his tone made it clear. This was final. My heart was in pieces. The rest of the morning is a blur. Maybe I threw something fragile across the room or rushed to the sink feeling sick. The pain was overwhelming, and dark thoughts crossed my mind. If anyone's reading this and has ever felt that low after a breakup, hear me. No one is worth harming yourself over. I'm incredibly grateful I recognized that in time, and I hope anyone else in that place reaches the same conclusion. Strangely enough, this nightmare may have been the jolt I needed to start seeing things more clearly. Right when I was struggling to pull myself together, my best friend Felicia messaged, asking if she could swing by. I desperately needed someone, so I said yes. Come now. The second she walked in, I collapsed into her arms, crying uncontrollably. She was stunned, but let me pour out the whole story about Caleb's text and the sudden end. Then she suggested we go out and get completely hammered. It was the perfect escape plan in that moment. Felicia's always been the friend who knows how to lift you up. I threw on fresh clothes, did my makeup, blocked Caleb's number, small acts that felt like reclaiming some power. We headed to the building entrance and hailed a cab to take us downtown for a night of forgetting. In the back seat, Felicia unloaded about how awful Caleb was and how men in general treat women like disposal toys, using them, then tossing them aside for the next shiny thing. I was half laughing, half crying along. The driver seemed off whenever she went on those rants, like it irritated him. But I was too caught up in my emotions to register it properly. Looking back, grief might have clouded my memory anyway. We were exiting the highway onto a side street when Felicia cracked a crude joke about Caleb's bedroom skills. Suddenly, the driver floored it, blowing through a light. We jolted forward. Felicia yelled at him to ease up. He ignored her, face twisted in rage. "What's your deal?" she demanded. He screeched to a halt in an unfamiliar neighborhood. Nothing looked right. We weren't anywhere near downtown. Before we could process it, he spun around, gun in hand. "Shut your mouth and hand over your phones." We froze and complied instantly. He snatched our purses too, then peeled out again. Felicia and I exchanged terrified glances, hearts pounding, as he sped us farther from the city. At one point, he drove over a bridge and chucked our stuff, including the phones, into the water below. We kept heading into rural areas. Several times I considered leaping out of the moving car, but fear paralyzed me. I couldn't even whisper a plan to Felicia. We were both too stunned by this sudden nightmare. Around 5 o'clock, he finally pulled up to what looked like an isolated rental cabin. "Stay put," he barked, stepping out toward the trunk. In those fleeting seconds alone, I whispered to Felicia, "If we team up, we can take him down." When he yanked open the door, I kicked him hard in the stomach and screamed for Felicia to jump in. She was right there with me. We wrestled him in a frantic blur, about 2 minutes tops. His gun clattered to the ground. Felicia dove for it, scooped it up, and aimed it straight at him. "Let her go." He looked wild, like he might lunge anyway, but he backed off. "Keys," Felicia ordered. He tossed them into the grass. I snatched them while she kept him covered. "We're out of here," she said firmly. We edged backward toward the cab. Just as Felicia reached the door, he changed. I swung the keys hard into his face, knocking him off balance. I dove into the driver's seat, started the engine, and yelled for Felicia to get in. She climbed into the passenger side and immediately flung the gun out the window. We didn't want any part of it. We sped away, watching him scramble uselessly behind us. Neither of us said a word for at least 20 minutes, just breathing, trying to process. Once we calmed a bit, I finally asked, "What the hell just happened?" Felicia rummaged through the glove box and found disturbing items. Newspaper clippings tied to white supremacist stuff, explicit magazines with extreme themes, even a locket that felt ominous. We drove straight to the police station, handed everything over, and gave detailed statements. The experience felt like something out of a horror movie, completely unreal. Later, we learned the driver was wanted in another state for murder. It's one of those chilling stories where people unknowingly cross paths with a killer. Even now, therapy helps, but the memory of how close we came to disaster, or something far worse, still haunts me. I know it's unfair to pin any blame on Caleb, but when I eventually told him the full story, he barely reacted, like it was no big deal. Sure, it sounds outrageous, but a shred of empathy would have been nice. I still wonder what exactly set the driver off. Maybe Felicia's rant about men, or maybe he planned it all along. We'll never know. Without question, it was the most bizarre, frightening Valentine's Day of my life. I've been seeing this guy for a few months, and he invited me over to his place for Valentine's Day. Before him, I'd gone out with a string of pretty ordinary guys, mostly interested in one thing, obsessed with sports bars and cheap beer. I was burned out on endless barstool debates and endless episodes of pizza reviews. I was ready for anything more stimulating. When I got there, he let me in, and stepping into his living room felt like entering a different world. Right away, I noticed the projector bolted to the ceiling. As someone who loves films, that instantly impressed me. Then, I took in the rest. The guy was clearly passionate about biology and plants. There were pots and trays of interesting greenery and succulents scattered around, creating this lush, almost outdoor-like atmosphere. Pretty incredible for an apartment in a concrete-heavy part of the city like Queen Street West. The walls in that room had framed vintage anatomical illustrations of the human body, the kind that are equal parts scientific and artistic. If you're not familiar, look them up. They're striking. Even now, they make me think about getting a similar design as a tattoo someday. I complimented the setup, especially the plants, and he asked if I wanted to see something really unique. I said yes, curious. But when he started heading toward the bathroom, I got a little uneasy. He caught my expression, chuckled, and promised it wasn't anything creepy. Still a bit hesitant, I went along. He opened the door, and there it was. This exotic plant with a slender green stem topped by a big, vivid red bloom. And from the center rose a tall, matching scarlet spike. I'd never seen anything remotely like it. We both cracked up when I joked that it was the most fascinating thing I'd ever spotted in a guy's bathroom. He explained it was a pygmy voodoo lily, super rare, from a specialty grower and way more expensive than his entire setup. He was proud, not just of its scarcity, but of the dedication it took to keep it thriving. He kept it under a glass bell jar most of the time, especially with company over. When I asked why, he lifted the lid slightly. One inhale, and the odor slammed into me. Rotting meat, but amplified to an unbearable level. Worse than spoiled food left out too long. As a nurse, I deal with bad smells regularly, but this made me gag and stumble backwards into the hallway. He came out laughing, saying that's exactly why it stayed covered. Gross as it was, I still found him intriguing. The most engaging person I dated in ages. A foul-smelling flower wasn't going to ruin things. But over the next couple of hours, things escalated in ways I never saw coming. While he was in the kitchen prepping dinner, I noticed some smaller jars tucked behind the foliage. Curiosity got the better of me, so I parted the leaves and froze. Inside were preserved specimens, one with a whole frog suspended in fluid, another with a completely dissected frog showing every muscle and tendon. Absolutely revolting. And a third just the bare skeleton. He tried to conceal them, which showed some awareness, but finding them right then killed my appetite completely. I was already on edge about eating his cooking, so it gave me an easy out. I kept hoping that was the peak of the weirdness. I genuinely liked his mind. He wasn't shallow, but the evening kept getting stranger. As we drank wine, and with barely any food in my system, I got tipsy rather fast. The conversation turned deeply personal. He asked about kids someday, not necessarily with him, but just in general. I admitted yes, under the right circumstances. I wanted them. That seemed to excite him. He went on poetically about how miraculous reproduction is, how women hold this incredible power to create life. It came across as genuine admiration, not some creepy nice guy spiel. Then he said there was nothing more beautiful than the beginning of life, and asked if I wanted to watch something on the projector. I was so excited about seeing it in use that I didn't even ask what. He set up his laptop, dimmed the lights, and we settled on the couch. It started playing, and I quickly realized it wasn't a movie. It was some kind of high-def home footage. At first, it showed a pregnant deer on straw bedding, hooked to an IV. I assumed it was wildlife rescue footage, maybe a vet helping with a birth. I even let out a soft, "Aww." Then, it switched to time-lapse. A hand entered the frame with a blade. I thought cesarean, but no. The abdomen split open, revealing not a fawn or healthy organs, but blackened, rotting tissue. Another cut exposed a massive, seething mass of maggots pouring out. I'm a nurse. I've seen horrific injuries, but that writhing swarm was overwhelming. I bolted up, grabbed my bag, and headed for the exit. He apologized profusely, begged me to stay if he shut it off. For a split second, I wavered. I'd overlooked the preserved frogs and the carrion-scented plant, but this crossed into something unforgivable. As I reached the door, still tipsy and furious, I demanded to know what the hell he was thinking. My gaze flicked back to the screen. Now the maggots had pupated into fat black flies swarming the carcass. Worst of all, the deer was somehow still alive, its head twitching weakly. The IV wasn't for treatment. It was to prolong the suffering while the infestation devoured it from inside. I stormed out, yelling that I'd call the police and that he was twisted, that if he ever contacted me again, my brothers would handle it. In the hallway, he muttered something about how much effort and money went into the project. That shut him up fast when he saw my face. He knew he'd just admitted to a crime. I sobered up quick in the cab home, phoned the cops, and told them the entire story. The driver's eyes got huge in the rear view as I recounted it. He even offered to wait with me until they arrived. I thanked him, but said no. The police took my statement in detail. A few days later, they updated me. He'd been arrested on suspicion of harming protected wildlife, but released for insufficient evidence. He never reached out. No texts, no calls, no showing up. He wasn't completely unhinged, at least, but his fixation on life, death, and decay was deeply disturbed. Subjecting an animal to that kind of prolonged torture? Unforgivable. Everything suggests someone like that escalates. I don't want to be the one in a true crime documentary years from now regretting that I didn't act. There's still an investigation ongoing. This happened back in the late 2017. But he had plenty of time to delete files before they searched. I can only hope they found something, anything, to keep him monitored or locked up. People with those obsessions rarely stop at animals. I'm just relieved I got out when I did. It was one of those ordinary, exhausting days that blurred together in the grind of everyday existence. After a particularly wearing shift at work, I made my way along the same route home. My thoughts a tangled mess of irritation and fatigue. The city pulsed around me with its usual clamor. Horns, footsteps, distant conversations, but I felt strangely detached, as though I were drifting through someone else's life. Halfway down the block, a woman suddenly appeared in front of me. She wasn't striking in any obvious way, yet something about her presence felt off-kilter, almost unreal, like she belonged in a different scene entirely. Her eyes locked onto mine with quiet intensity. Without a word at first, she extended a red envelope toward me. "Valentine's card," she murmured, her voice so soft it somehow sliced cleanly through the street noise. I blinked, caught off guard. Who hands a random stranger a Valentine? I accepted it automatically, more out of confusion than interest. The envelope felt worn, edges softened as if it had spent days in someone's pocket. She studied me for a long, unreadable moment, then simply turned and vanished into the flow of pedestrians. 1 second she was there, the next second gone. I stood frozen for a beat, staring at the plain red paper in my hand. It seemed harmless enough, yet I couldn't bring myself to drop it in the nearest bin. Instead, I tucked it into my coat and continued walking. Back in my small apartment, the one place that usually felt like a refuge, I set the envelope on the kitchen counter while I started dinner. The longer it sat there, the more it seemed to pull at my attention, like an object that refused to stay invisible. I tried to ignore the faint prickle along my spine, telling myself it was just fatigue playing tricks. Eventually, curiosity won. I slit the envelope open. Inside, on otherwise empty white cardstock, 4 words waited in smudged black ink. Will you be mine? No signature, no explanation, just those words, looking oddly desperate in their imperfect lettering. I forced a short laugh. Probably some prank, a weird marketing stunt, anything but serious. Still, an uncomfortable tightness settled in my chest. I kept glancing behind me while I ate, half convinced I'd catch movement in the corner of my eye. The apartment stayed silent, ordinary, empty. That night, the question looped quietly in my head as I lay in the dark. Will you be mine? I told myself it meant nothing. I was wrong. The next morning, the red envelope still sat on the counter like an accusation. I pushed the whole thing aside, dressed for work, and I left. The day passed normally enough, but the walk home felt heavier. The crowd pressed closer. Every passing face seemed to carry a hidden, knowing smile. When I reached my door, my stomach dropped. Scrawled across the wood in thick, dark streaks, almost like paint, maybe worse, were the same 4 words. Will you be mine? My hand shook as I turned the key. Inside, everything looked untouched. Too quiet. Too still. I couldn't settle. Couldn't think straight. In a surge of panic, I snatched the card and held a lighter to it. The paper caught quickly, curling into ash. But the smoke that rose wasn't normal. It thickened, turned a deep, unnatural crimson, coiling through the kitchen like living tendrils. The room spun. My lungs burned. Then the floor came up fast. I came to lying on my own kitchen table, bare skin cold against wood. No clothes, no memory of how I'd gotten there. When I looked down, everything inside me froze. Carved into the flesh of my chest and stomach, raw and precise, was a single word. Mine. Pain arrived a second later, bright, blinding, tearing through every nerve. Shock kept me silent at first, then terror propelled me. I staggered to the phone, each step agony, and called emergency services in broken gasps. Paramedics, police, hospital lights, doctors stitching and cleaning and asking careful questions I couldn't really answer. They found no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no trace of anyone in my apartment. I lay in the hospital bed afterward, staring at the ceiling while machines beeped softly. The police returned later with news that made the room feel smaller. They had recovered the card, the one I'd burned. It sat undamaged in an evidence bag, pristine, and the message inside had changed. Now it read, "I'm glad you're mine." Time in the hospital blurred into colorless days. Nurses came and went. Pain medication dulled the edges, but not the memory. When discharge finally came, I knew one thing clearly. I couldn't return to that apartment, couldn't walk those streets, couldn't carry any piece of that life with me. I left everything behind. Furniture, clothes, keepsakes. Let the landlord deal with it. I found a plain, anonymous rental far from the city center and tried to disappear into routine again. Valentine's Day came around once more. This time, the date on the calendar felt different. Not romantic, not trivial, but marked. A quiet anniversary of survival. I spent it alone. Deliberately so. No cards, no crowds, just silence I had chosen. The scars across my skin have faded some, but they remain. A permanent signature I never asked for. I still don't know who she was, or what she wanted, or how any of it was possible. I only know I'm still here, and for now, that's enough. On Valentine's Day in 1992, I was 23, chasing dreams of making it as a musician while scraping by in a small place just beyond Redding, California, often misspelled as Reading back then. I worked part-time at a local auto repair shop 3 days a week, always starting bright and early at 7 a.m. That Friday, February 14th, landed right in the middle of my shift. I was scheduled from 8 until 3, but I'd promised my girlfriend a proper Valentine's celebration. A nice dinner out, some thoughtful presents, and catching a movie afterward. The timing was tight. After work, I'd have maybe an hour and a half to race home, clean up, grab the gifts I'd stupidly left until the last minute, and swing by to pick her up from her job without being late. I was already regretting my lack of planning and felt the stress building as I drove to the shop, secretly wishing for an early release or some miracle to free up my afternoon. When I pulled into the lot, though, everything looked wrong. The garage doors were all rolled down, lights off, and my boss's truck wasn't parked in its usual spot. He was the most reliable guy, never late, practically lived at the place. So this was unusual, but I didn't panic right away. I figured he might be running behind for once. I stayed in my car, reclined the seat, and tried to steal a quick nap while I waited. Next thing I know, I jolted awake. The clock showed nearly 8 a.m. I dozed off for almost 35 minutes. Still, no sign of my boss. This wasn't like him at all. I had his home phone number scribbled in a notebook back at my apartment, so I headed home to call. No answer. I left a message on his answering machine and sat there, unsure what to do next. Part of me thought maybe he was ill or had unexpectedly taken the day off. Great news for my Valentine's plans, honestly. But deep down, it didn't sit right. Why wouldn't he have told us? I decided to phone one of my coworkers to double check if we'd been notified of a closure or late start. He hadn't heard anything either, and assumed we were opening as usual. When I told him about the dark shop and absent boss, there was a long silence on the line. Then he asked if I was free right then. I said it depended, but yeah, I had nothing else going. He suggested we drive to the boss's house together, just to make sure he was okay. It seemed like the responsible thing, and it wouldn't take long, so I agreed. About 15 minutes later, he pulled up outside my place, honked, and I hopped in. He was noticeably on edge during the 20-minute drive, growing more anxious by the minute. I tried to stay optimistic. Maybe we'd scored a free day off, but he shut that down quick. Our boss lived for that shop, he said. The man never missed a day of work except Sundays, and if he were sick, he'd have called to let us handle things. By the time he finished, I felt ashamed for even entertaining the idea of slacking off. Checking on him was clearly the right call. We turned onto his quiet street. Nice, spread out homes with tall hedges and fences for privacy. As we rolled into his driveway, a chill hit us both. The front door stood wide open. No truck in sight. We sat frozen for a moment, staring at that open doorway. It wasn't screaming emergency yet, but the worry level spiked. My coworker reached into his glove box and pulled out a handgun. I'd grown up around firearms, so the gun itself didn't shock me. It was the reason he felt he needed it that made my stomach drop. I asked what was going on. He told me to stay in the car. Shift to the driver's seat, he said. If he wasn't back in 5 minutes, drive away and call the police. He left his keys in the ignition and walked toward the house, gun ready. That was the first time I truly understood terror. Not the everyday fears like rejection or getting caught with a little weed, but real life or death dread. There was a genuine chance he might not make it back out. I wondered if he was overreacting, but by then he was already inside. A few agonizing minutes passed. Then he emerged, stumbling off the porch before bending over and vomiting violently. That sight told me everything. No one reacts like that unless they've seen something horrific. I got out of the car and asked what was in there, though I already sensed the answer. He didn't go into details, just that our boss was dead and that he called the police from the house phone. We needed to wait for them. I stood there, numb, feeling like this couldn't be real. It was real for him because he'd seen it, but for me, it still felt distant, almost dreamlike. Part of me wanted to go look, to prove it wasn't some sick joke, but another part was grateful he'd kept me outside. I didn't want that image in my head. I asked how he died. Still wiping his mouth, voice thick, he said one word. Murder. I echoed it back in disbelief. I'd briefly thought maybe suicide or an accident. Something that could explain the gruesome scene without involving foul play. But murder? He nodded. How could he tell? I asked one last question before the cops arrived. What made him so sure? His answer has stuck with me ever since. He was taped to a chair. Police arrived soon after. My coworker had already stowed the gun. We gave statements, handed over our info, and were told we could go. One officer went inside briefly and came out visibly rattled, though not sick like my coworker had been. In the days that followed, we wondered about next steps. My coworker suggested filing for unemployment. I worried the cops might suspect us, but he figured not. We were just employees checking on our boss. They contacted us only once more after the initial interview. The shop stayed closed for years before anyone bought it out. The bigger question lingered. Why our boss? The answer came surprisingly fast. His missing truck had been stolen by a pair of drug-addicted criminals, a man and a woman who'd broken in the night before Valentine's Day. They'd gotten bad info that he was rich, hiding gold bars or cash or some big score in the house. When he insisted he had nothing like that, they didn't buy it. They bound him to his office chair, removed his shoes and socks, and started burning his feet with lighters and cigarettes to force a confession. He even offered to take them to an ATM, but they wanted the imagery treasure. They kept going, escalating the torture up his legs until, well, his heart eventually gave out. Even then, they didn't leave empty-handed. They took his truck keys and drove off in it. They were dumb enough to cruise around Reading, trying to sell the vehicle locally instead of ditching it far away. A patrol officer spotted it a few hours later and pulled them over. Both were arrested on the spot. The woman later confessed they did the whole thing so they could afford nice Valentine's gifts for each other. That twisted motive stands out as the most surreal part of the nightmare. The pair spilled everything to the police. Every stupid detail. I've heard meth heads sometimes talk freely when cornered, especially if cops hint at easing withdrawal symptoms in exchange for cooperation. By the end of that year, around the holidays, they were both sentenced to life in prison. To me, though, life felt far too lenient for what they did to a good man. My boss, my friend. They should have faced something far harsher. Anything less seemed like letting them off easy after such cruelty. And that, dear friends, brings a close to these true horrific Valentine's Day stories. I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the rest of the members of BackToAshes. Thank you all so much for your loyal dedication. I am blessed every day to call you family here at BackToAshes. And of course, as I always like to say, without you, I don't have a voice, and I would be sitting here talking to myself, in which I would rather not do, so thank you. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed this collection. In the meantime, please stay vigilant and take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.